Hey everybody, Jimmy Smith here to talk about the gift that keeps on giving. Conor McGregor and his return date. So right now, the latest development is Dana White was on the Pat McAfee show and said he's hopeful that Conor McGregor, I assume versus Michael Chandler, can be put on fall of this year, fall of 2024. The reason I have called this the Conor McGregor Con, I will get into it in a minute. But take a look at the timeline. It was supposed to be at the end of The Ultimate Fighter last year. This is when Conor said, when asked if he was coming back, that's done. I'm getting in the USADA pool. We'll have an announcement during The Ultimate Fighter. That never happened. So, never happened. Then, he said it would be International Fight Week of this year. He had entered the USADA pool. The signs were looking good. And then Dana gets more and more frustrated when asked about it. Not frustrated, but exasperated. Like he doesn't want this to drag on and on and on. There's not very much he can do about it. So the reason I call this a con is it's extremely simple. This was taught to me very young. My father was a pool hustler. It was my dad, my cousin, and a friend of theirs who was a world champion in pool. Apparently he was in the Color of Money, the final tournament at the end. He's one of the guys in there. He's this real famous pool pro for years and years and years. And what I was taught when I was a kid was a hustle or a con relies on hope. That's what makes a con work. So when you're hustling somebody in pool, you don't blow them off the table. You beat them by one shot. They think they can win. And then you take them and you take them and you take them and then you let them win. Then you go from my dad, who's a very good pool player, to my cousin, who is even better. And then my cousin would play them, take their money, but barely beat them. And then they would finally win. And then they would go to this world champ who would do the same thing. So you got them feeling good because they won. But it's hope. The win, beating the person you're trying to beat in pool, is just out of reach. But it's never, I got blown off the table. Because then you stop spending money. All right, this guy's going to beat me every time. I'm not going to spend any more money. If you barely beat them. So winning is just tantalizingly out of reach. They'll keep going. See the analogy here? Conor's always just over the horizon. Just beyond where we can see. And his tweets and his talk and all this stuff, that's how a con works. You don't say, I'm not coming back, F this. You say, I would if not for this. I would if not for that. It's coming, just wait. And you just keep an audience, in this case, a fan base, constantly on the edge of their seat because it's just out of reach every single time. But it's still out of reach. These people in these pool halls in Cerritos and Bellflower and Long Beach weren't going to beat my dad and my cousin in this world champ. Or if they could beat one, they wouldn't beat the other. That's part of how the con actually worked too. But this idea that you aren't going to win anyway, but you don't know that until it's too late and you lost all your money. So that's why I call this, Conor McGregor's con. His long con game is to keep his return just out of reach. Therefore, he's in the media. Therefore, he's constantly getting his brand, for whatever worth that is, out there. Why would he do that? As much as Conor makes his money now almost entirely outside of fighting, being in fighting does something for him. And years ago with Joe Rogan, there was even before I went to the UFC, there was, talk about, who knows how long he'll be doing this, And I remember talking to somebody about it who said, no, Joe wants to be in the fight world still. Even though his brand with the Joe Rogan experience is so, a lot of it's removed from fighting, having at least one foot in fighting, meaning doing the pay-per-views that are domestic in the United States, does a lot for his brand. And it's a similar thing for Conor. He doesn't need fighting. He doesn't need the money. But still being around that mystique that a lot of people are still attracted to. Because fighting has a real allure, especially people who have never done it before. So there's still that allure of, he might come back. He's still on people's minds. Now, the difficulty here, when you break it down, you go, well, what's the problem here? Right? Why is Conor not coming back? Well, let's logically break it down. All right. I, was a fan of Conor's fighting. He's an entertaining guy when he fights. But I'm not a rabid Conor fan. He can do no wrong. I'm not one of those people, obviously. So let's just logically break it down. What parts need to work for Conor McGregor to come back. The UFC needs to want it. Conor needs to want it. His opponent needs to want it. Is USADA / the commissions or whatever, do they need to, they have to accept it. In all the years I did commentary, one time I saw a commission step in and say, we're not allowing this fight to happen. This guy's not experienced enough. One time. All the fights I called, and I called hundreds, thousands, whatever. One time. So commissions weigh people in. They make sure they pass the drug test. That's about it. They don't weigh in and go, this person shouldn't be fighting. Generally, that's not an issue. So there are 3 cogs. The UFC, Conor McGregor, and his opponent. Michael Chandler, hypothetically, it's becoming much more tenuous every day for Michael Chandler. But Michael Chandler wants it. In fact, I wouldn't know if he's desperate for it simply because he's apparently making enough money that he doesn't need to fight. Apparently going 2-3 in the UFC at the level in which he competed and the deal he got is enough that he doesn't need to do it, I guess. Because he's missed out in the year that he's had off, more than a year at this point. 3 fights, maybe? If he's making decent money, that's $1 million. So he's already passed up maybe $1 million worth of fights in this period anyway. So I wouldn't say he's desperate and that apparently he doesn't really need to fight, but he really wants to fight Conor McGregor. If they said you're going to do it next week, he'd jump at it. He doesn't care. He's one of those guys who's generally in good shape all the time, and he has every reason to believe this fight is a winnable fight for him. So Michael Chandler definitely wants it. The UFC, they make money, a lot of money, off Conor McGregor. One of the things I've been harping on the past few months is the star problem in the UFC. We're looking down the barrel of a UFC 300 that doesn't have that circle your calendar, can't miss, unbelievable main event. It doesn't have that. It'll get the crossover fan. As I always say, the guy at 7-Eleven who doesn't generally watch the UFC will watch Conor McGregor, will come out of the woodwork for X fighter. Ronda Rousey, Conor McGregor, right? Izzy is as close as you can get in this category. Sugar Sean O'Malley, whatever. These crossover stars that people at least are excited by, right? If not over the moon about. Conor's that guy. And the UFC would love to have Conor come back, makes them a lot of money. Even if he costs them a lot of money, they make it back, and it just brings a lot of eyeballs. And right now, the problem with MMA is we get a lot of it. We get a lot of cards. We get one every weekend, basically. But that star power of the world stops for this fight, that's not as common. One of the reasons John Jones is I think getting the Stipe fight and probably riding off in the sunset is, hey, I'm one of the few, calendar circling fights that you could have on. So the UFC wants it. Michael Chandler wants it. Who's the other holdup? Conor. Conor doesn't want it. I have been adamant about since the middle of last year that Conor's never going to fight again. I don't believe he's ever going to fight again. Why? What's changed? Why should he fight fall of this year when he wouldn't fight fall of last year or spring of this year? What's changed? Nothing. There's no reason why this goalpost keeps getting moved backward. There's no in fact, at his age, with his number of fights and what he's been through physically, the longer you wait, the worse it's going to be. The longer you wait, the worse it's going to be. Coming back from shattering his shin in the last Poirier fight, he has 3 losses in the last 4 MMA fights. 4 out of 5 if you include the Floyd Mayweather loss in boxing. So there's every reason to believe that the further this drags on, the worse Conor McGregor is going to do. So this isn't, an attorney who doesn't want to go to court. You can do that till you're 70, right? When we're talking about somebody as an athlete whose athletic prime has a finite number of years, and those are slipping away. So the further this goes on, the more likely it becomes that he never does it. He's not coming back at 45, okay? So there's that, all right? He's drifting off into the, there's no reason for it not to happen up at this point, and the longer you wait, the harder it is. So my simple logic is there's nothing right now since middle of last year, which I imagine was about rehab time for him and time to shoot the Roadhouse movie and all that stuff, and get anything out of his system that would have kept him out of USADA or whatever the UFC's doping program ends up being. And by the way, I don't begrudge him at all. Jesus Christ, if I shattered my shin, I would take a pharmacy to get back on my feet. Couldn't care less, right? So I'm not even mad at the guy. Take whatever you want, man. You had a disastrous injury. Whatever it takes to get over it, I'm totally with that. But it has to get out of the system in order for him to compete again, to get into the USADA pool or, in this case, UFC's testing program pool, whatever it is. So, the nothing has changed since the middle of last year. So all of these delays, the only person I can imagine being behind it is Conor. UFC doesn't want any delays. Michael Chandler's losing money every month he doesn't fight. It's got to be Conor. And the analogy I have, don't know how many people can get this, who are chess fans or whatever. Bobby Fischer, the greatest American chess player of all time. When it came time to defend his world title, his world chess championship, against Anatoly Karpov, what did he do? He didn't say, I don't want to play Anatoly Karpov. He said, I want this from International Chess Federation. And they caved to, 9/10 of it. And then they went, no, you can't have, I think it was like a draw goes, basically a tie. The champ keeps his title. And they said, well, you can't do that. And he went, fine, I'm not doing it. I know that's an analogy a lot of people don't know, but my point is, when most people in a competition setting don't want to do something, they don't say, I don't want to do this. They say, well, I want this. So it's your fault. I want all of this crazy shit. I'll complain about everything under the sun. No, it's got to be here. It's got to be there. It's got to be this. It's got to be that. Rather than saying, I don't want to do this. It's your fault. Well, I would have, but the UFC does this. So Conor's never going to come out and say, I don't want to fight anymore. It's, the UFC doesn't want to work this out. I don't like the timetable. I don't like the opponent. I don't like this, or that. And I think that's going to be Conor from here on out is, I want this, I want that, until it becomes a non-factor. Now, when will Dana White, who has thrown people under the bus for much less than this, it doesn't behoove Dana White to throw a guy who's made him a ton of money under the bus until he absolutely has to. Until it's, because, you see he's refrained from doing that. And one of the questions I get all the time is, man, he's been, Dana White, so much worse to other fighters who have asked for much less or held out for much less time. Why? And, well, guy made him billions of dollars, probably all told. He'll cater to him until it's just over the moon done. But you see why I call this a con. Because it's always just tantalizingly out of reach. Confidence game. You believe something is going to happen. And when it doesn't, you just, when the goalpost keeps moving, it has to move almost, the amount is different for every person. If you're a diehard Conor fan, you believe he's coming back forever. If you aren't, like me, who, I enjoyed watching his fights, I've been around this game a long time, I can see, to me, that, it's just barely out of reach every time. And so, I don't buy it. If he was going to fight, he would have fought by now. And there's nothing right now, February 2024, that makes me think fall is any more realistic than winter, which is any more realistic than early next year, which is any more realistic than never. Hope I'm surprised. Partly because I see Michael Chandler get his due. The guy's been waiting around forever. But there isn't anything right now that makes me think the time is anytime soon. I don't think he ever fights again. And he's using that just out of reach thing to keep that hope going and keep his brand going. So anyway, let me know what you think in the comment section. But I think it's a con. Cons require hope. And Conor's giving us just enough of that to keep going. Anyway, later on, let me know what you think. Bye.